Well, United States President Donald Trump kicked off his State of the Union address to Congress with a message that America is back. The primetime speech, his first to Congress since taking office on the 20th of January, capped a second day of market turmoil after he imposed sweeping new tariffs against Mexico, Canada, and China. Trump told Congress that he had taken more than 100 executive orders to restore common sense and wealth across the country. He added that people had elected him to do the job, and he was doing it. For example, he said his administration had launched the most sweeping border and immigration crackdown in American history amid ongoing mass deportations of undocumented immigrants from the country. Well, as we say, President Trump delivered his first address to Congress since returning to the White House, where he unveiled his second-term vision. Trump's start to his second term has seen dramatic changes that have reshaped both domestic and foreign policy. Well, let's get more on this address. Let's get an update from our SABC News correspondent, Sherwin, Bryce-Pease. And obviously, Sherwin, watching that, I mean, I suppose starting off with one of the Democrats getting kicked out of the House, Al Green, and then it just, obviously he had his moment to go. Perhaps you want to give us a little bit of an understanding as to what's been going on.
Come on, Leanne, you know this is what happens in parliaments, right, around the world. Lawmakers stand up, they protest, and they get escorted out by the sergeant at arms, sometimes bundled out, and that was what happened to Representative Al Green, who at the beginning of Donald Trump's speech stood up, and of course he's not mic'd, so we couldn't hear exactly what he was saying. We understand he was protesting potential cuts to Medicare and Medicaid, of course part of DOJ's efforts to implement sweeping cuts across the federal workforce and bureaucracy, of course led by the South African-born billionaire. So he stood up, Trump paused a little bit, got irritated, he was escorted out, and Trump continued the speech. I will say you got an enthusiastic welcome from Republican lawmakers. Of course, you'll know, Leanne, they are now in the majority in terms of, they had the speakership in the House, they control the United States Senate and the White House. So this was a full circle moment for Republicans. I'll just give you a breakdown. So in terms of the dynamics, right, Democrats were essentially seated. They didn't applaud much. They didn't greet Trump when he walked down the aisle at the beginning. And they sat with little signs in their hands during the speech, Leanne, signs that read things like Musk steals, or just simply false, or lies, or save Medicaid. And they would put these signs up as the president was speaking. Republicans at times broke into chants of USA, USA. Trump started by saying America is back. He has a mandate that, that has been unseen in a long time in the United States, talked about winning the popular vote in all the swing states. People elected me to do a job, he said, and that's what I'm doing. He talked about Joe Biden being the worst president in American history. At one point, he even reached out to Democrats, right? They were sort of sulking there, arms folded and not very happy to be in the room. And he said at one time, there's nothing I can do to make Democrats smile, stand, or applaud. And he at one point appealed to Democrats to join him in celebrating so many wins in the United States. Of course, Democrats didn't join in, Leanne, because they don't believe there are many wins. But of course, Republicans then stood up and, endorsed what he was saying. So it was a speech very much to the MAGA base, right? He talked about social issues. He railed against trans issues in the United States, LGBTQI. He talked about how he made English the official language of the United States. So very much issues for the base in terms of international affairs. There were questions around Ukraine, what he might say around Ukraine today, given the friction we've seen between President Zelensky and President Trump. And he said he received a letter from Zelensky before his address to Congress, which he really appreciated. Zelensky in this letter talking about wanting to implement the rare minerals deal and that they're ready to work with the United States. And this, in many ways, was a softening of the tone from Donald Trump. He also talked about reclaiming the Panama Canal. He also talked about wanting Greenland, that we're going to get it. But I will say this, he didn't mention South Africa, if that was your next question, Leanne.
Well, it wasn't. It wasn't my next question, because I didn't think he would on that particular platform. But certainly the trade wars are something that I think especially Canada, I mean, there's an outcry from one of their biggest allies, Canada. There's obviously China that's worrying as well, and many of the other countries that have had these tariffs increase to 20 and 25%. Perhaps you want to touch on that, because that's one of them. And then he went big on this whole, there are only two sexes in America. I mean, I'm reading one quote here, one of them saying, so two issues I'm going to throw to you. Now I want Congress to pass a bill permanently banning and criminalizing sex changes on children and forever ending the lie that any child is trapped in the wrong body. Our message to every child in America is that you are perfect exactly the way God made you. So that is another standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, there's one element in the U.S. Constitution similar to the South African Constitution, and the question of privacy rights and, government, it's the same conversation you have around abortion. What is the role of government if this is a conversation between yourself and your doctor? So that will be tested in the courts, right? This is Trump's vision. It's akin to a State of the Union address. Of course, his first address to the joint sitting, it's not called a State of the Union, but laying out his vision. And of course, Congress will take this up. And of course, the courts will weigh in, as they have been doing, in terms of the number of executive orders that he signed and that are being tested in the U.S. federal courts of law. In terms of the tariff question, of course, you know that 25% tariffs went into effect at midnight, overnight, 24 hours ago. Canada, of course, responding. The Mexicans said they would respond. And you've seen the Dow Jones drop by about 1,600 points in the last couple of days. And so now you're beginning to hear cabinet secretaries, Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary, talking about how he might be recalibrating his views and maybe changing his views. So we might get some more action in terms of the tariffs. But he talked about tariffs tonight. He said tariffs is a beautiful word. Of course, a lot of economists disagree with that notion. If you don't make your product in America, you will pay a tariff. We have been ripped off for decades by every country on earth. Tariffs are about protecting the soul of our country. So he is hell-bent on maintaining tariffs, reciprocal tariffs. We're told this is going to go into effect on the 2nd of April. And it really does begin to question the free trade agreements that exist between, the United States and various countries, including the free trade agreement that allows South Africa to be part of the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. What is the future of that, given the bilateral slant that you are seeing Donald Trump take here in terms of relationships? You'll recall that the United States and Mexico already have a free trade agreement signed and negotiated under the first Trump administration that exists, that he's now undermining with these tariffs. So where we go from here in terms of tariffs, it's going to be a bilateral question, and it's going to be a deal-making question between two countries, and not the multilateral fora that we've become so accustomed to, I think.
All right, Sherwin, thank you. We'll dig deeper into it in the next hour as well. Be interesting to see what Trump had to say again about that funding freeze to different organizations, including that hurts us as well here in South Africa. But let's leave it there, Sherwin. Thank you very much for joining us from New York, Sherwin Bryce-Pease.